Hey YouTube, hey subscribers, thanks for tuning in. In this video, we're going to discuss the base model narcissist, standard features to expect. So for those of you not familiar with the term base model, the base model of something is basically the most standard, basic version that you can get. The definition according to Oxford is a basic version of a product to which alterations, additions, and enhancements can be made as desired, specifically the standard and usually the cheapest model of a motor vehicle. So those of you who have purchased a vehicle before have probably had this discussion with the dealership. Is this a base model or not? What can I add? What can I take away? Things like that. So in dealing with narcissists, there are some common traits and features that come standard with each and every single one of them pretty much across the board. They will all share these specific features, and then there are a few additions and extras that sometimes come with narcissists, a few optional features that can be added on to your unique narcissist in your life. So let's go through some of these characteristics and traits of the base model narcissist, the most standard version of the narcissist that you can get. Now, before we start, it's important to note that a narcissist can be male or female. They can be of any race, any culture, any ethnicity. They can be anywhere on the income spectrum, and they can be considered attractive by general standards or unattractive by general standards. Make sure that you keep your framework of what a narcissist can be, look like, wide open, because they literally cover the spectrum. So let's go ahead and get into some of the most basic, standard, baseline features that come with all narcissists, no matter who they are. Number one, they are categorically poor listeners, and they are known for their bad communication skills. So this means that they interrupt frequently. They talk too much, so they tend to monopolize conversations. They tend to go off subject and off track a lot, sometimes on purpose, but oftentimes it's just because they're not paying attention to what's coming out of their mouths. They tend to not engage in the standard exchange that is communication between two people, meaning a sender and a receiver, a message and a response, that type of back and forth type tennis match. They're very, very bad at that. I would say that this is the number one sign that you're dealing with a narcissist. It's the communication skills or lack thereof. Number two, a standard feature of all narcissists is they are categorized by a deep imbalance. So no matter what it is, the relationship is not going to be reciprocal when you are engaged with a narcissist in some way. So that either means that you're giving more time than they give, you're giving more effort than they give, you're giving more money than they give, you are being a better friend than they are, being a better lover or spouse than they are. There's always some imbalance. And what makes it narcissistic in particular is that there's a certain expectation that comes with that imbalance, almost like you are supposed to be giving more than I am for some perceived, preconceived reason. So I'll give you an example of this that I think everyone can relate to. So a baby has very little control over its life for the first couple of years, really, but especially in those first couple of months, they don't have a choice but to be imbalanced in their relationship toward you. They have no way of returning the favors and the gift and the caretaking that you're giving them. They have no way to return that to you. They literally have no choice but to be dependent upon you in a very imbalanced way. And of course, I'm not saying babies are narcissists. What I'm saying is the baby has no choice but to be imbalanced in their approach because they can't do anything for themselves. They're helpless. A narcissist is not helpless, but they take the same approach as an infant, which is you need to serve me and give me everything that you have at all costs. And you have to do this because of what I am. Now, the baby has to do it because of what they are. They're an infant. They're a baby. They can't speak. They can't talk. They don't really know where they are yet. They can't walk. They can't work. They can't do anything. They're totally dependent upon you, and you have to give those things to them in order for them to survive. Narcissists approach all of life as if people have to give these things to them in order for them to survive. And it's not true. They're typically functional enough to earn living. Sometimes they have very prosperous careers. So they're not incapable to the extent that they can't take care of themselves. They just believe that they are owed this particular thing from either society or from this individual person or group of people. Number 3, narcissists are very repetitive in thought, words, and actions to the point where they become very predictable. Now, this kind of plays into number 1, which was the poor listeners and bad communication skills, but it still stands out on its own in the sense that when you're dealing with a narcissist, you'll know it because they will tell you these same stories over and over and over again. So it's almost like their minds are on a very strange loop. They can get very hung up and caught up on certain things. So they're very repetitive, but it's not just stories though. It's also the way they respond to certain situations becomes predictable. You know what they'll do. You know what they'll say. Eventually, you'll come to find that the way they handle conflict is predictable. You'll eventually come to find that any attempts to resolve issues, have a discussion, always follow the same pattern, which is leading to nowhere. You just keep running in the same circle. You just keep going the same cycle over and over and over again. And eventually it all becomes predictable and repetitive. And this can be applied anywhere. So anytime you feel you're not making progress, that you're skipping over and tripping over the same issues and you can't resolve them because you literally can't have the conversation, the narcissist in your life is totally unwilling, absolutely let you know that you're dealing with at least a base model narcissist. Number 4, they are all irresponsible and unable to take responsibility for their actions to a fault. So no matter what it is, the narcissist will find a way to make it not their fault and to make it absolutely someone else's fault. Narcissists have trouble understanding that sometimes responsibility is shared. Sometimes there are percentages to responsibility. It's not always 0-100. Sometimes it is 0-100, but oftentimes responsibility is 50-50. Responsibility can be 70-30. It can be 90-10. It can be 80-20. Responsibility can be shared, but the narcissist does not see it that way. Anytime it even appears that some responsibility might fall on the narcissist's shoulders, it makes them self-destruct. It's like the self-destruct chip. They start to basically implode upon themselves because the idea that they've contributed to their reality in any way, or the idea that they're responsible for something that either went wrong or something that needs to be fixed or something that had consequences, they can't handle it. They have to live in a world where they are blameless, where everyone else is at fault and they have no part of the blame whatsoever. If you try to shed light on a narcissist's portion of the responsibility, they will battle you to the end to make sure that you understand that they have no portion of the responsibility. And this is often why they're not successful in life, because they don't ever see where they can correct. They don't ever see where they are misstepping and where they can correct that misstep and then maybe go on a better path. They don't see it. So they're completely fundamentally unable to take responsibility for things. It's too much for them. Even if it's a small fraction, it's too heavy for them and they will push back every time when it comes to responsibility. Number 5, all narcissists lack creativity and imagination. And what I mean by this is not necessarily the ability to paint and draw and make movies and things like that. What I mean is they lack the ability to think in more than one direction. Narcissists tend to think very much so in a straight line. They don't think around the corners. They are very much in the box. They are not capable of out of the box thinking. Once narcissists have decided on an answer, that is the answer they've decided on, and it will remain that for the rest of their lives. They will never move off that block. Never. It will be the same answer, the same response, the same solution, the same conclusion every time for life. If you try to introduce new information that challenges that idea that they've latched onto, they will spit and cuss and buck back and do everything in their power to hold on to the one idea that they've decided is a good one. And if you're listening, it seems that they're all related. Like there's traceable themes here, that inability to think outside the box. So they're stuck. So what happens when they're stuck? They end up repetitive in thought, actions, words, deeds. They totally lack the ability to devise new solutions to their problems. So if they have a problem and they can't solve it, they just decide that the problem can't be solved. And so they stay stuck with that problem for life because they don't believe that anything can change it. I did a video called Narcissists Are Tortured by Their Own Minds. They are, because they can't get out of this way of thinking. They are trapped like on a hamster wheel in their brain, and it causes them to have negative consequences in life, and it causes them to have really poor relationships because life is fluid. Life moves, life changes, things change, circumstances change. But narcissists are determined to kind of fight that wind with everything they've got, and it wears them out and it wipes them out. Moving on, number 6, all narcissists are lazy. And what I mean by lazy is lazy in spirit and lazy in thought. And many of them are also lazy in action. Their goal is to do as little as possible to achieve the results that they want. So this kind of plays into the number 2, deep relational imbalances. Narcissists find ways to extract from others what they want to accomplish. And that's how narcissists think. And they think it's great. They think it's brilliant to find ways to extract from others or leech from others and conserve their resources. And the truth is, a lot of corporations think this way also, and they think they're winning. The problem is eventually you will drain dry everything around you and implode. So the beautiful thing about narcissism is it does reach an endpoint. It does reach a point where it can go no further, but it causes a lot of damage along the way. And it can take a long time to reach that endpoint, but that endpoint does come. The laziness just comes also in the expectations of servitude. They expect to be served. They expect to be catered to, and it's not a mutual exchange. Narcissists are lazy. They extract from people. They are leeches, and they try to get as much as they can out of whomever with very little effort in return. Number 7, narcissists are childish and immature. They are childish in their reasoning. They're childish in their logic. They're childish in their approach toward life, what they believe is important, what's not important. They have a very self-centered view of the world. They don't consider the consequences of their actions like a child often doesn't. The only difference with children is they're children and they're still learning. And hopefully the adults in their lives are teaching them, you can't do that because when you do that, it's bad because XYZ. So hopefully they're teaching the children consequences of their actions. The problem with narcissists most oftentimes is they're old enough to know better. They are indeed old enough to have experienced enough life to know better, and they choose to do differently. Some would argue that it's not a choice, that it's just the way their minds are set up and that they're stunted in a particular age. And that may or may not be true. I did a video called Sick and Dangerous. If it is true, it is unfortunate, but it doesn't make them any less dangerous. It doesn't mean that you should still try to engage with a person who's determined to approach life in such an immature way, even after they've gotten enough feedback to know that this is not the way I should handle this. They've gotten enough proof that their approach is not working, and they still try that approach anyway. That's not someone you should spend a lot of time around, because in many ways you're wasting your time. So narcissists are extremely childish and immature, and oftentimes when you're interacting with them, you'll feel like you're dealing with a toddler, like an adult toddler. Number 8, in my last bullet point, all narcissists have a tendency to destroy the things that they are a part of. So sometimes they mess it up quick, sometimes it comes a little bit later, but the destruction always comes, be that of a business, a family, a neighborhood, themselves. The destruction always comes because narcissists refuse to acknowledge the law of cause and effect. They refuse to align with universal principles. And as a result, they keep trying to do things their way, even though their way is proving to them over and over again that it's not working. Narcissists have a tendency to stay on a bad track, even when it's proving to them that it's not working. They will disregard all feedback that says anything to the contrary of what they believe to be true. And they will stay on a sinking ship and drown because they are determined to get the boat back up, even though half of it is underwater. So these are some of the standard features: poor listeners, deep relational imbalances. They're very repetitive. They're irresponsible. They lack creativity. They're lazy in spirit and thought. They're childish and immature, and they have a tendency to destroy the things that they're part of. So here are a few optional features that come with narcissists. These do not always come with the narcissist. They tend to be add-ons depending on what your narcissist has been through, who they are, the different circumstances, the way their brain is set up. You might get some of these features. Number one, you might have a nice add-on of jealousy and envy. So a lot of narcissists tend to be extremely jealous or envious of something or someone, and it consumes them, every fiber of their being. Number two, you might have a narc who is also incredibly rude. All narcissists are not necessarily rude people. I did a video called The Sweet Narcissist, where they're very sweet, very kind, very charming, but still narcissists nonetheless because they have all those base model features going on with them. But they're not rude people. They might actually be very polite. Number three, another optional feature is they may or may not have a god or goddess complex. They don't always have this. A lot of narcissists can be very insecure. And so, with that insecurity, you tend not to think that you're a god or a goddess if you're insecure. So that's why it's an optional feature and not a standard one. They may or may not have that god or goddess complex fueling them, which often fuels number six, which is that expectation of servitude because they're just fundamentally lazy. And the fourth and final optional feature that might come with your base model narcissist is they might be pure evil. They might be owned and possessed by a resident demon living in there. I don't think all narcissists are necessarily possessed. I do think that there is a scale. There is a spectrum. I think on the lower end of the spectrum, you just get those super annoying, kind of irritating narcissists. They're really no threat. They just kind of get on your nerves. They're very draining, though, at that lower end because they still have that sucking quality about them, that leeching quality. I think the possession becomes either stronger or it actually just enters in towards the end. When you start getting up towards the more malignant levels, I think that's when they start to have hosts that come in. But that is not always standard with a narcissist, which is why they didn't make the base model list. Anyway, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this rundown of the base model narcissist. And hopefully this helps you spot and identify these people quickly so you can avoid entanglement as much as possible. As always, I grant you the permission to exist. Bye-bye.